Hey everybody, Greg Poole here at Junkie Media, bojunkie.com. It's time for another podcast. Hope everybody out there is doing well. If you are at any of the archery events that have been taking place here over the last couple weeks or so, we have had some pretty consistent weather across the country. Whether it is snow in some places, hail in others, rain in others, it's been a little bit wet out there. So if you're driving to any of these events, which I hope you are to participate, just please be careful. It's no joke out there, and as we continue to move through these months of archery, it's we are entering the most busy time in our sport. Not necessarily our industry, but in our sport with local, regional uh, tournaments, national tournaments, the whole nine yards. I know we had a cancellation for one of the big ASAs due to some weather, so hopefully everybody out there in London is safe and getting through that. So just go ahead and jump right into this. For those of you that tune into the program regularly, first of all, thank you for that. We did a podcast with Bruce, Cull, and Brittany from the NFAA here several weeks ago regarding the Rushmore Rumble moving locations from Yankton to the ATA. And to a lot of folks, and look, I'm just going to say this, the ATA has tried doing some cross promotional events before. We all remember the 100-yard hallway broadhead shooting. That was very popular, but that's kind of went by the wayside here of late. But today's guests, obviously more than just these two guys, they have teams, but they basically put this together where the Rushmore Rumble is now going to be taking place at the Indy Convention Center with the ATA. And so that's going to be what we're going to discuss today, not just the fact that it's there, but we're going to get into some of the hows and the whys. The the new president CEO of ATA might be unknown to some of you, so obviously we'll get through some of that. Uh, Everybody here, if you listen to this program and you don't know who Bruce Cole is, go over to the corner and practice falling down, and Bruce will be there in a minute. Bruce, of course, as for those of you watching on video, he will probably get into some of his hair care routine, so you can emulate the do that he has going on there. But anyway, let's get this started. Welcome to the program, Bruce Cole and Jeff Poole from the ATA. How are you guys doing?
Great,
Welcome.
Greg.
Excellent, excellent. Bruce, office is looking spectacular. Jeff, this is your first time on the program. Hopefully, the first of many. We can make this somewhat of a regular occurrence. I appreciate you coming on board. So, first and foremost, for those of you that aren't familiar with, obviously you're familiar with the ATA and Jeff, but Jeff, just kind of give us a brief history of not all your resume, of course, but basically how you got here.
Yeah, Greg, I'm still considered new, I guess. I've been with ATA now for about 3.5 years. And prior to that was with National Rifle Association for about 30 years in a variety of different roles there, but mostly in the membership area, the trade show area, and merchandise and licensing areas. And when it comes to archery, though, I've even with NRA, I've been a bow hunter and a target shooter for a long time. So the transition over to archery was easy from the perspective of being familiar with the equipment and using the equipment, but not so much from being an insider when it comes to the archery industry. And after being in one industry for 30 years, you kind of become an insider in that length of time. So that's really been a priority of mine over the last 3.5 years is to try to travel around as much as I can, meet with our members, both the manufacturers and the retailers. I've probably been in no less than 60 retailers over the last couple of years. I visited with just about all of the major manufacturers and gotten a nice tour of their facilities and met with their management and listened to them and what their concerns are in the day-to-day operation of their business and what they would like to see from ATA. So I kind of feel like those 3.5 years have been time well spent to get to a point where we can start doing some pretty making some pretty significant changes.
Sure. I mean, and that's, look, nobody expects a, a guy like yourself to come in here and on day one just be completely, it is a learning process. There is no doubt about that. And so just real quick, that much experience on the NRA side, there's a lot of similarities. Of course, there's a lot of differences as well. So just kind of real briefly in your 3.5 years, and we are going to get into some of the history of the ATA folks and basically how the ATA got to where it is right now. Hashtag not Jeff's fault. But give us some of like maybe your top couple things that have both um, kind of been a little disappointing in this learning curve, but also some of the positives that you've learned in this 3.5 years about this side of the outdoors.
Yeah, what a great question. I think the in terms of disappointment, I, I really can't point out any great disappointment. It's been an experience. The archery industry is certainly unique.
Right.
We talk all the time, and the word passion is thrown around so much, and yeah, certainly it is a passionate industry. That's not a shock to me. That's not a surprise to me. I've been a participant in the industry for a long time, and I come from an industry that is very passionate as well.
Sure.
The bigger differences have been coming from an environment where, on the one hand, you have a bona fide threat. Somebody is actually trying to take your guns, not necessarily trying to take your bows.
Right.
And the other difference was working in a primarily an end user organization in NRA versus a B2B organization like ATA. So there are definitely different interests represented by the membership, and and ATA is a very unique association in that ATA services both the retailers and the manufacturers. And when you look across membership organizations, trade associations, you don't see that very often. You see organizations that represent the retailers or the manufacturers. And a lot of times their interests are different.
Right.
Sometimes they conflict. So trying to stay abreast of what both the retailers and the manufacturers need from ATA has been probably the primary focus.
Yeah, for sure. And so what are a couple things that have surprised you in a positive way over this last 3.5 years? Because obviously there's been some transitional stuff that's happening. You're out, you're trying to get deals done and you're trying to build partnerships like the reason for today's podcast. But what are a couple of things that have really impressed you positively about the last 3.5 years?
Well, the time and attention and importance that is given to youth participation,
Mm,
and bringing new shooters into our industry. Everybody likes to talk about youth programs and how important they are, but that's probably been the biggest positive is seeing how that is actually applied in this industry and the support, the real genuine support that it gets across the industry from the manufacturers to the retailers. That is one thing that we all have in common.
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we could beat that drum all day because, kids are our future and we're experiencing the same thing Little League football is, or excuse me, Little League baseball is, Pee Wee football is,
Mhm.
soccer, like everybody's experiencing the same thing. And I think it's generational that, and we're starting to see that trend turn a little bit over the last year or so, less than a year actually, starting maybe middle of last November. But uh, you know, we have a generation or so of kids that just simply aren't as active. And so that part in and of itself, I think we're starting to see that trend turn, but that's absolutely a great answer. So let's jump right into this. We got Bruce, we got Jeff on here. How did this ATA Rushmore Rumble conversation even get started?
You want that, Bruce?
We're both going to say the same thing. So I think it just came from talking at events. Jeff, as he mentioned, has done, I think, a really good job as the head of the ATA at traveling to all different events and dealers and distributors and manufacturers. And we met and talked about it. We had discussed, before his tenure, we tried it once before. I think we tried it mutually with another organization, and it just didn't fit what we were doing. I mean, I think we tried before, so it was an attempt, but I think that this had all the natural components. You know, as I think most of the listeners probably know, the Rushmore Rumble is a money shoot. This isn't a trophy shoot. So when I say money, let's start at the bottom with those kids. This is scholarships. And to every age group imaginable, and as our old comment in the NFAA is, if we don't have a division, we'll make one for you. The Rushmore Rumble follows that. But we got great kid participation, and then we have the amateur participation. It's a different format than most. It's kind of its own thing. And then of course at the top end we have the top pros, and we have a pretty good number of international ones. And I think one of the things that I recognize right away is so many of our international shooters, that come to Vegas as the example. It's so busy there for both the vendors, the manufacturers and the shooters, that they have a hard time like maybe seeing all the stuff. And I thought, maybe this is something we can talk about, and maybe this will get legs, and some of those people will come and they can spend time talking to the manufacturers at a little more laid back environment, I guess. And then secondly, just bringing people in, the ATA, I've been hearing it for at least 3 years, maybe longer, about opening up something to the public,
Right.
whatever terminology, Jeff, you want to use, whatever that is. When I say opening up, it's not like it's a rummage sale. It's not free to walk in. You're going to see the top equipment in the world. And so that adding to the tournament, it was kind of a natural, and they've got the space, all the details, the management of it kind of fell into place. They've got a great team. We've got a great team. They've been working together. And I mean, everything that I've seen right now, knock on wood, looks very positive. I mean, the biggest thing, Jeff, and I won't steal your thunder with this because I know it sure brightened me up just yesterday to hear it. The number of vendors that are going in the area to stay the whole time
Yeah.
was almost blew my mind. I
Mhm.
mean, and I'll let Jeff take over that. But I mean, that's kind of how it came together. I don't know, Jeff, if you have anything to add to that, but
Well, yeah, the decision to add some consumer days to the show, I really wasn't interested in simply just adding a couple days for consumers. Really trying to identify some ways to really turn this into a unique event. Target shooting was not well represented at the ATA show, so we have an opportunity there. And when Bruce and I got together and started talking about some different ways to go about it, some different opportunities, like you said, things started to fall into place. I hesitate in using the word easily, but the opportunity was there. And in reference to exhibitors right now, we're in the middle of booth space selection right now, so we're only about less than halfway through it. But we have a significant amount of the show floor filled already. We have the floor segregated so that exhibitors can only exhibit in the 2-day trade show if they would like, or they can exhibit in all 4 days. And so we have a separate hall that the trade show only exhibitors can exhibit in. And at the end of the trade show, we simply close the air wall. They move out, doesn't affect the rest of the show for the 2 days of the consumer portion. As we've gotten through almost half of our exhibitors, um, we only have three companies in the trade show only area, and we have about 80 or so in all 4 days. So that's really where the proof's in the pudding. There's a lot of talk about, do we like it? Do we not like it? Are we gonna do trade only? Are we gonna do all 4 days? Well, when you've got to pick your booth space, that's when you have to make your decision. And the momentum is certainly there for just about every exhibitor going all 4 days, meaning they're there for the trade show and the consumer show.
Absolutely. It's okay if I show this map, right? That you
Yeah,
sent?
sure.
Okay. So for those of you wondering, yes, how's that showing up here? Yes, I'm prepared for this conversation. So that was the most awkward display of a map the internet's probably ever seen. But unfortunately, I have to follow Bruce Cole's lead here. Don't judge me or do, whatever. So I have the map of the 2026 ATA. And so on the one side on Maryland Street, you have the hotels, and then West Street comes along the backside. You have all your loading docks, and then of course Capitol goes that direction. So just kind of, I don't obviously need all of this, but looking at this on here, because there's a bunch of halls, literally A through K. For those of you that count,
Mhm.
you won't need to take your shoes off to count up that high, but you might need to put down your phone. So where exactly will the Rushmore Rumble be held? Which hall?
Do you have that down there, Jeff, on your map?
Yeah, yeah. So Greg, if you're looking at that map, the Rushmore Rumble will be in Hall D and E, and the ATA show, the the consumer portion of the show, as overlapping into the trade show, will be Hall F. So that will be adjoining Hall E and adjoining the Rushmore Rumble. Hall F, G, H, I, and J.
Are all
J,
are so E and E are the Rushmore Rumble. F,
correct.
G, H, I, J are all going to be the 4 day halls.
Well, J will be the trade show only hall.
Okay, J is
And
trade.
if you look at that space in between, that's not an open wall. Um, we're not going to have the sound of the tournament interfering with the trade show and or vice versa. You'll be able to go through there, but there'll be separate, entrances to both right there.
Okay, so F, G, H, and I are going to be basically where the 4 day is going to be, correct?
Correct.
All right. And for those of you listening or watching, I am making drawn, non very artistic notes on this, and I will reprint this out and do this better, and I will post it for you folks to actually look at. So, in looking at this map, we see basically in between J, I, and H, some space that has numbers. Are those like rooms out on a hallway, or what exactly is that area in the gray there?
Yeah, you have uh, all the numbers. Those are meeting rooms. So all those small numbered spaces are meeting rooms,
Okay,
and the let's call it pinkish space in between is corridor.
gotcha. Okay, that's fair. And then I would assume, as normal, food, beverage, all that kind of stuff is basically going to be integrated somehow into the halls FGHIJ, correct?
Yeah, there will be some integration. Hall K will have a large cafe area in it, and then off of the corridor areas, there are several um, restaurants, concession stands, that kind of thing.
Off of J, you said?
Off of the corridor areas.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Okay. And then what are halls A, B, and C going to be used for?
They will not be used.
Not in use. Okay. And then for those of you that have been to these events, they have uh, basically humongous floor to ceiling sliding walls. It's how they kind of cordon all this stuff off. It's pretty impressive to watch. I'm not going to lie. Um, okay, and so in order to navigate from where the Rushmore Rump, so on this map, which direction, Bruce? Do we know which direction you guys, folks, will be shooting?
Well, back to back. It'll be back to back lines, very similar to um, our nationals in Louisville. The size is not nearly as big. We don't need to have it for 3,000 people, but um, it's going to be back to back lines with basically an opening in the center, so we have audience or spectators on both sides watching.
Okay, and Jeff, will there be any food and beverage in the hall where the Rushmore Rumble is, or will folks have to navigate down to the other halls for food and beverage?
Outside of the entrances to Hall D and Hall E, right outside those doorways will be concession areas.
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah, and Greg, one thing I would add, just so you know, when you look at those CAD drawings, they can look really big to some people or they can look really small.
Right.
Everything's pretty close proximity. It's
Sure.
I've looked at enough CAD drawings in my life, and I know Jeff has that, we know those dimensions, which is hard to just sit here and tell you. But it may look like a long way, but it's not. It's not to downplay the size of it, but these are huge halls.
Oh yeah, no,
Um,
absolutely. And
you
so
know, and it's
yeah,
it's
I was going to ask you for some frame of reference there, Bruce, when it comes to halls D and E, where the Rushmore Rumble is going to be. I don't expect that. I don't expect halls D and E to be as big as the giant thing we had in Louisville, but give us some sort of perspective for archers that have been to a nationals before on what sort of room we're looking at for D and E.
we're going to be looking, like I said, they're going to be back to back lines. I don't know what direction that is, but it'll either be north, south, east, west, whatever it is. We'll be shooting back to back.
Thanks,
Our our,
Alan. Yeah.
our center will be the DOS, kind of a standard setup, and I believe we've got 40 to 50 butts on each side.
Okay.
So that would mean that, 200 people can shoot on a side, so that's 400 at a time.
Okay.
And, obviously we can go 4 lines in a day. If we need to go longer, we can. That's the one nice part, being together, but yet having some independence. We can start earlier in the morning with our lines. We can go later at night if we need to. Because the big thing from our perspective, we have no idea how many people are going to attend. Obviously, we're betting on the come, so to speak. I mean, it's Indianapolis. It's a bigger area, especially for our kind of clientele. We
Sure.
did a heat map of archers, and on just like ATA does, and we've got a lot of people within a tank of gas of Indy. So
Right.
I would look for that to be somewhat bigger, and we're just hoping and praying that everybody comes and supports everything,
Yeah.
ATA and Rushmore Rumble.
Yeah, we will definitely get into that, and I agree with you, Bruce. From a proximity standpoint, people whining about Yankton notwithstanding, you're just literally going somewhere that has more potential bodies. So I would fully expect that you are definitely going to see a pretty good growth index for the Rushmore Rumble. So as far as these halls go, D and E, are those give people some per, perspective on how big those are. Is each one of those halls as big as the Yankton Center? Are they smaller, bigger?
Yeah, each one would be, each side would be like where we would shoot the Rumble now.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so it's considerably bigger in feet. I don't know if you've got those there, Jeff. I don't have them right here, but 50 butts is 250 feet. And then we basically take 80 feet to shoot. So that's 160 by 500 would be the total of those. And I'm going to go so fast, I'm going to lose everybody. But it would be half of what Louisville is
Okay.
and about twice the size of what Yankton would be.
Nice. Yeah. And well,
That's
I mean,
probably the easiest way to tell the archers.
that's good enough. I mean, yeah, we definitely don't need a total square footage because that would probably confuse people more than
Yeah.
using current buildings as a reference. And so Jeff, to you, Obviously I referenced the 100-yard hallway broadhead shoots the ATA used to have. And I don't remember exactly where those were, but there's probably still some arrows buried up under the carpet from broadheads that didn't stay closed, but that's a whole nother topic. So for you, what did the ATA have to navigate with the facility here to actually, allow an event like this to come under the roof?
Well, I'll tell you, Greg, the facility has been extremely accommodating. The fact that this holding the tournament there was really nothing that they blinked at because we've had the ATA show in the building for so many years, and we typically have 60 or so shooting lanes in the building that that was not really something that they balked at all. So they've been very supportive. Of course, they're also looking at let's be real about it. They're looking at adding a few thousand people in early January to downtown Indianapolis. Yeah, they were very welcoming.
Okay, well, good. Obviously it's not a broadhead shoot. No one's shooting 100 yards. It's only 20. So, as
Mhm.
far as that goes, it would be pretty easy for Bruce and the crew to provide data, kind of showing that. But I'm happy to hear that, that they were definitely receptive to that. Now, so as and you brought up a good point, which was shooting lanes. I will assume for the sake of this discussion that any vendors that have bows or whatever that they want to shoot, that vendors will still have the capacity to have shooting lanes over in the ATA portion, correct?
That's correct. As it's drawn now, there is about 60 lanes available.
Okay. Well, good. Good. Yeah, no, I think that this is ultimately going to be, something that's going to be beneficial to both. And so let's just transition into that a little bit. And like I said, folks, I'll redo this map and make it more legibly and I'll post it for you guys so you can actually see, what's going to be what. But like Bruce said, it's not like on a map, we see this is not a 1 million square foot Amazon distribution center. It's not 300 yards from here to here. So walking from one to the other is going to be uh, fairly simple. So let's just get right into kind of some of the meats and potatoes of attendance. We all know, or for those of you that don't know, dealers, manufacturers, they all get badges. There's a process in place for that. The first 2 days are going to be BTB. You heard Jeff reference that. BTB is business to business. And so the first 2 days are going to be that. And then the next 2 days are going to be opened up for consumers to purchase tickets and get in the door. So first of all, Jeff, how much are those tickets going to be if a consumer wants to come one or both days of the open ATA?
We just nailed that pricing down, Greg. The advanced pricing, which would be any tickets ordered online through the end of this year, through 12/31, is $25 for a 1 day pass, $40 for a 2 day pass.
Okay.
Kids 6 to 14 is $10, and under 6 is free.
Okay.
And then on-site pricing, uh, or any sales after 12/31, the 1 day pass goes to $30, the 2 day pass goes to $50, and the kids' pricing stays the same.
Okay. So you guys are allowing folks just to show up and buy those tickets. It's just a little bit more as pretty much everything is. That's just
Yeah, correct.
how that goes. So now, and I don't necessarily have a problem with those prices, to be honest with you, especially because of what Bruce was talking about. I think a lot of people are going to come. And so for archers that are shooting the Rushmore Rumble, does their registration cover attendance to go over to the ATA for the DTC, which is direct to consumer, folks? Does their Rushmore Rumble shoot fee cover them being able to walk through the open ATA?
Yes, it does. So all of the tournament participants would have free access both days to the consumer portion of the show, and their guests, their family, friends, whoever they bring with them, would be able to get in at half price.
Nice. That was going to be my next question.
Yep.
So, family is half. Now, do participants get an and one for free, or is the and one half price as well?
Well, right now, the and one is at half price as well.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I think we talked about that, and I think that what we came up with is really fair. There's got to be, and in this day and age, I even think of $20, $50. I mean, in Yankton, South Dakota, to go to the movie, it's $30, and if you buy anything, you end up spending $100. I mean, so I think for what they get to see there and what they get to do, I mean, I sure think that's a great value for the money.
Well, I mean, under normal circumstances, like, look, you're not going to charge people at Vegas for their and ones or anybody to walk through, but that's not the ATA show. So I think the differentiation here has to be said that for people that go to ASAs, IBOs, tax, any of the NFAA events or Reading, that's not the ATA show. It's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to shoot any normal tournament, yeah, you can go walk through the vendor area. That's all part of that. With this being the ATA, I think it's probably almost going to be required that there be some sort of additional qualification or fee or access, whatever you want to call it, for people to go from not the shooters per se, but and ones and family to be able to access such a substantial setup when it comes to the booths, because these are not just booths. These, and yes, some people release new products at, which we're going to get into that as well, Jeff. But, some companies do release new products at some tournaments here and there. But the ATA show is specifically, barring some bow stuff, but basically the ATA is the organizational, the industry, the sport trade show. So it's not a vendor show, it's an actual trade show. So there being a little additional fee for that doesn't hurt my feelings at all. I think it's almost required.
Yeah, I agree with that. And just the differences in the show floor at what they'll see there at the ATA show versus most of the other tournament shoots where it's trade show type displays, it's carpeted aisles. I used to stand inside the entrance doors at the NRA show and watch people come through the doors and audibly say, "Wow." And that will be the same view that people get when they come through the doors and see the trade show quality displays across the floor. There'll be a wow factor.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about kind of the transitional time between the first two BTB, business to business days of the ATA, and the next day, which I believe is Friday, correct?
Correct.
So Friday, ATA transitions to the open tickets, and then Friday is official practice for the Rushmore Rumble, correct, Bruce?
Yeah, that's correct.
And so that Friday morning, because look, folks, this is Jeff knows this, Bruce knows this, we all know this. Companies are going to have to and I'm pretty stoked to see how many companies are staying for all 4 days. But let's just be honest, folks. Thursday night, companies are going to have to do some transition. They're going to have to, get rid of dealer pricing. They're going to have to put out, if they print a different catalog with integrated dealer pricing, they're going to have to take that out. It's just a different vibe when you're talking to engagement wise, when you're talking to a dealer, distributor, those pricings and stuff, those are not for public consumption. And so there is going to be a little bit, there is going to be some booth transition, we'll call it, on Thursday night when things close. What time will booths be opening up Friday morning?
Yeah. good question. It's something we just solidified again with the admission rates recently. Friday's show hours will be 10 o'clock, so it won't open until 10 o'clock in the morning and run till 7 in the evening. And then Saturday, now this is for the show only.
Right.
The tournaments got some different hours. Saturday, the show will open at 9 a.m. and run till 6.
I like the fact that on Friday and a lot of folks might not necessarily get it, but I think bumping the open time for the direct to consumer trade show part up to 10, I think that's a good call. Let booths get those adjustments done. They'll be buzzing Thursday at the end of the day after two condensed days. Because look, we're not going to try to fool anybody, folks. Those 2 days of the ATA business to business trade show are going to be way busier for folks because not every a lot of dealers used to come on the last day, which they still can. It's not that they can't, they can still do that. But the dealers that want to get in, get out, get back to their shops, there's going to be some dealers that don't want to mess around with the consumer side. That's cool. It's a little bit for everybody. That's fine. But the booths on Thursday at the close of business, they will probably had 2 very busy days. So giving them an extra hour or so on Friday morning to transition over, I think is a good call.
Yeah, I agree, and just allowing some more time for the consumers to come in. Of course, the tournament folks as well, but they'll all be drive-ins at that point.
Right.
So a little bit later start in the day, and they're not in any kind of rush hour business day traffic.
Right. And then so Bruce, on Friday we have a 10 to 7 for the what we'll just call the open ATA, for lack of a better term. Unless you have coined some other phrase you want me to use, we'll just call it the open ATA.
Yeah, Greg, we are calling that consumer event the Archery and Bowhunting Super Show, and referring to it in short as the Super Show.
Super show. All right, I'll probably stutter on that, so I might have to modify that a little bit to
Okay.
suit my speech impediment. See there, I just did a GP's remix. Anyway, so on Friday we have from 10 to 7 for the show, super show, and then 9 to 6 on Saturday. Bruce, what are the comparable timelines for the Rushmore Rumble on those days?
Well, the practice day, we haven't set the exact time yet, but I'm going to tell you they're probably going to be a 9 to 6 thing. That's generally what we do. Sometimes we've gone later, but we really will probably wait very close to when we get registration numbers in to look at that. The more people, the more we can go. Like I said, the one good thing is being independent as far as that. We can go later if we need to.
Sure.
And when it comes to the shooting days, we're going to be at 7 a.m. on Saturday. Again, Sunday will be determined, but Saturday, and that'll be good. As a great example there. So on Saturday morning, the ATA opens at 10, right? Yeah. So
On Saturday, it
7
opens at
o'clock
9.
line will be done about that time. So it's going to be a pretty good, schedule mix there where people can go if they want to go see that then. And because that will, when we end a shoot, as you know, Greg, there could be 500 people plus all their friends, relatives go, okay, let's go over here now. And
Right.
that'd be a pretty good influx of people. So,
Sure.
having staggered lines like that really helps that.
You're right.
It'll help the flow in the show. So,
So in Hall's D&E, Bruce, how are you guys facilitating? And I'm assuming there's room, or is it another hall or whatever? Practice
that's in there too. We've got,
and
yeah,
bow storage.
yep. And the bow storage will either be in there, we have room for it, or it'll be outside in an adjoining room. We haven't completely decided that, but it's really irrelevant at this point. We'll have 25 practice butts always available.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to preface that. Numbers are going to determine that again.
Right.
That's what the plan is right now. But we're kind of both working on the same thing. I mean, nothing would probably make Jeff any happier for him to say, you know what, we got to get another room or we got to get another section.
Sure.
Right.
And we have the same ability. And we would know it ahead of time because obviously we have to bring equipment. But um, that's, they're both going to be there. We're obviously practice is a huge thing and we're going to make sure we have enough of that. So,
Okay. And so what sort of just basic, Bruce, I'm not asking for, hard line numbers, but what sort of shooter capacity can you handle this year or
well,
technically?
okay, if we go back to the 100 butts, that's 4 on a butt. And if you do 3 lines, that would be 1,200 people. If we do 4 lines, it's 1,600.
I,
Um,
I think you did.
and I mean, I'd like to say we're going to have more than that, but that wouldn't be realistic, I would say right now. Um, I would say that the 3 lines will be enough to accommodate it.
Right.
But I'd do nothing but jump for joy if we couldn't and had to have more.
Right. Well, that's definitely a good problem to have. But I mean, if that's where your capacity is to start, I think you're going to be okay. I could definitely see this partnership kind of moving that direction to where you do get, like I asked you, why didn't you do NFAA indoor nationals here? But you answered that on the other podcast. So I guess, Jeff, this question comes to you. Let's say that this, and I am going to ask you some questions about kind of, what you're looking to see the ATA, not necessarily get out of this. That's kind of the wrong word, but we'll get to that. Just to say, for an example, this year that they have 750 for the Rushmore Rumble. Let's say the following year they have 1,250, year 3, 1,500, etc. How do you see your relationship timeline wise and contractually with this facility to sustain that? Not just the ATA's growth, but if the shoot really explodes.
We're contracted with Indy through 28. So for the next 3 years, we'll be in this space.
Okay.
And we have room to expand. As I mentioned earlier, Hall A, B, and C is currently not being used. We could expand into Hall C if we needed to. Now, beyond 28, looking at other opportunities, we are already looking at some facilities for 28 under that same scenario, Greg, of some potential growth with the shoot, potential growth with the show. If we're able to add exhibitors back into the show as a result of adding some consumer days to the show, then we should see some growth there as well. Um, so we're not doing anything crazy. We're not looking at Las Vegas. We're not looking at even Nashville. Everybody loves Nashville until you find out how much it costs to be there.
Right.
Uh, but looking at some places that ATA's been in the past, like a Columbus, and making sure that in our space requirements, we have, instead of just looking at space for uh, our exhibit space, that we have adequate space, um, and we have the buy-in from the facility to actually operate a shoot there.
Okay, good. I mean, and that's obviously that's the goal. And so speaking of goals, let's kind of transition over to that. I talked to Bruce and Brittany about this in our podcast, but now Jeff, you're here. And so here comes your chance. Um, when this conversation started happening, considering, and we're going to talk about this as well, kind of what you're having to do to kind of get the ATA back where it needs to be, in my opinion, anyway. What were the top things that because look, Jeff, I'm just not going to bullshit anybody here. It's your job to do what's in the best interests of the ATA organization. No different than it's Bruce's job for the NFAA side of things. And that's totally cool. And that's why it's a partnership. But what are some of the things that you are looking for on behalf of the ATA when it comes to this partnership?
Well, the partnership with NFAA is key to getting to the outcome that we envision with this event. This event made up of not just a trade show, but the trade show being a portion of the event. Looking at the opportunities that are out there, that are in front of us, that we have not envisioned in the past, we have not had the gumption to step forward into in the past. Um, and not having tunnel vision into saying we just have to operate a trade show and we need to find some way to make that work. Trade shows evolve, events evolve, industries evolve, and we need to evolve as well. We might be playing a little bit of catch up here, but we do need to evolve. The trade show itself, um, look, if you've been to the trade show, that's the one thing about these types of shows. You can't hide anything. You can put a different shade of lipstick on it, but you can't hide it. So it has been shrinking. We have been losing exhibitors, which means we've been losing retailers. It's the chicken and the egg kind of thing, only in reverse. Which one can you get back? You need to get this group back so you can get that group back.
Right.
And right now, exhibitors have been telling us if you had a consumer element, we would consider um, coming back to the show or increasing our presence in the show. And really, consumer shows have really taken off since COVID. The ATA show was declining even before COVID, but COVID certainly accelerated that.
Sure.
And we can't keep doing the same thing and expect different results. So we have had to listen to, not that we should be listening. When you talk about what the ATA is and what the ATA wants, that's a reflection of what our members tell us they want. We survey on this every year. Um, and exhibitors increasingly have been telling us how important a consumer part of the show is.
Right.
But of course, we have the retailer side who, finds some objection to consumers coming in and being in front of the same companies that they do business with. And rightfully so. It's a legitimate concern. Um, the way we've approached it is the success of the trade show right now depends on either getting more retailers back, which will draw the manufacturers, or more manufacturers back, which will draw the retailers. We have the greatest opportunity to bring in more manufacturers by opening up a consumer element to the show, and not just consumers. This more of a comprehensive event. That's
Right.
where our relationship with NFAA and that partnership and bringing target shooting into the fold. The ATA show more recently has drawn criticism for just being a bow hunting show. So there is opportunity here to reinvigorate the target shooting side part of the ATA show. Once the once we are able to attract more exhibitors into the show or back into the show, and those that are in the show increasing the size of their space, that's reason for retailers to be coming back to the show as well. So I don't see it as the consumer element running off or alienating the retailer side, because the companies that will be selling in the show, the exhibitors, the manufacturers that would be selling at the consumer part, at the super show, they're the same companies that are selling now at major tournaments, at TAC events, and elsewhere.
Right.
The companies that are not, there's no reason for them to start selling at the super show when they're not selling at these other events. It doesn't include bow companies, arrow companies, a lot of the major manufacturers. So I understand the concern for the retailers, and we are definitely taking that to heart, and we are trying to address those concerns. But they're not any concerns that don't already exist out there in different events.
Sure. Well, first of all, that was a great answer, and there's lots to unpack there, and we're going to. But before I even get to that, I have to give you a lot of respect just for taking ownership of some of the 800-pound gorillas in the room that, generally speaking, ATA CEOs have swerved like they were Neo from the Matrix. So r respect to you, and I gave Bruce the same respect for, his ownership of some Vegas stuff. Uh, Just the fact that, Bruce is taking ownership of some of the stuff on his side, and the fact that you, as president CEO of the ATA, are taking ownership and actually acknowledging things everybody has been talking about forever is a
Mhm.
huge first step. So I'll just start that comment off with saying it's great to see you actually take ownership and acknowledge things that have been known for a while anyway. So great job on that. You mentioned selling. So let's just go ahead and jump right into that because that's going to be something that a lot of people look, folks. You're not going to get the bow companies are not selling bows at the ATA regardless. I mean, maybe some tiny little one will because they're desperate, but for the most part, none of your big bow companies are going to be selling bows there. I You're not going to get, Easton's not going to be selling arrows. I mean, so you're like he said, the folks who come to sell product at indoor nationals or Vegas, they're going to come here and sell product as well. That's just what it's going to be. And so my question for you, Jeff, is are there any limits, restrictions, guidelines for companies that do want to come to the direct to consumer, the super show side of this during the Rushmore Rumble that want to sell that were there the first couple days? What sort of guidelines or restrictions do you have for that?
There are not a lot of restrictions there, Greg. First of all, they have to be legit. So in Indiana, they have to have all the paperwork filed, any transient business licenses to sell in an environment like that. It would not surprise me at all, in my experience with a consumer show, that there are revenue agents on the floor making sure, checking papers and that kind of thing. So all are advised accordingly there. In terms of what product can be sold, what product can't, taking delivery on it, so on, there's there's not a lot of restrictions there. As you pointed out, there's no expectation that bow companies are going to back the truck up and be selling out of the back. That's just it's not going to happen, and it's not something that they want to do. What they do want to do is um, promote their product, market their product in a way that they think they can do it best. They designed it, they built it, they work with it every day, and this gives them an opportunity to market that product direct to the consumer and get consumer feedback on those products as well.
Absolutely.
In that environment, you can demo it in the booth space. You've got the shooting lanes to demo the product, so it's really a desirable environment for manufacturers to want to be in front of consumers and then drive those consumers to their local pro shops. And we're going to facilitate that. We'll have dealer locator kiosk around the show for ATA member retailers. I think most of the people in the attending the show are going to be, um, let's say, very active, whether it's in target archery or bow hunting or both. So they're more than likely know where their local pro shop is, but can we give them another one that's 20 miles down the road or 30 miles down the road or carries this brand or that brand? So
Sure.
we will be doing what we can do to support retailers out of the show as well. But when it comes to restrictions of what can be sold and what can't be sold, we haven't developed any restrictions just yet.
Okay. Well, and for those of you wondering, and it was not just one or two companies, but historically speaking, at the end of the ATA show, a lot of that product goes home with people that aren't the companies anyway. So
Right.
if you've been delusional enough to think that no sales have happened, no sales are not happening on the show floor every single day, but arrangements are made, and a lot of those companies sell that stuff to dealers so they don't have to haul it back home. So that's common. So that part's not going to change. You mentioned a couple things that I want to address when it comes to the current dynamic. And I guess first of all, the shopping experience and the way the archers are shopping and buying has changed so drastically over the last decade that, maybe the ATA was definitely not ahead of that curve. I'll put it that way. But dealers aren't either. Some dealers are, but for the most part, they're not either. And so you mentioned the dynamic of bringing back retailers and bringing back manufacturers and then the direct to consumer side. Anybody who has been paying attention, and Bruce knows this all too well because the NFAA has been great at, small to large selling vendor areas at their events since I met him a couple decades ago. So Bruce is already way ahead of this, but consumer shows, whether they're textiles, whether they're the Salt Lake City Hunt Expo, whether they're Harrisburg or the Iowa Deer Classic, I could talk for an hour just naming consumer show. If you go to the Harrisburg Consumer Show and you walk in the front door and you walk all the way through that show and go out the back door, you've walked almost a mile. So consumer shows are massive. I mean, massive. And so I think part of that dynamic that you were talking about is, yeah, and you're right. And you said it out loud, which I was glad, and I'll repeat it because you said it, but that dealers, retailers, they don't want to mess around with consumer shows. They don't. It's my opinion, and we can get into this. I do want to talk about some media and some influencer stuff at the ATA, but the ATA show, I can remember doing things 10, 15 years ago where you had signings and there was lines all the way down the whole show. And you had every television show, every influencer, everybody was there. And I love dealers, man, but dealers complained more about those people than any manufacturer ever could. And so I think and look, anything with a pendulum can swing too far both ways. And this was before your time, of course, but I think the ATA went a little bit too hardcore on getting rid of, TV shows, influencers and stuff. And I think we've seen some of the ramifications of that. And so I think what you're doing to do a couple days BTB and a couple days as the super show for consumers, if you can get consumers to come to this event in mass, not 100,000 of them, of course, I doubt the facility could handle that, but if you can create a situation where you get enough customers to come make the last 2 days a viable consumer show, you're not going to have to ask any manufacturers to come back. They already will. And so you absolutely hit the nail on the head there. And so my question to you, all of that was leading up to this question is, how are you navigating the inclusion of a couple consumer days and I doubt you're getting any blowback whatsoever from manufacturers, but you probably are going to get blowback from dealers. So how are you navigating and balancing those two other than saying, well, hey man, you got the first 2 days. If you don't like it, don't come, which you're obviously not going to do.
Yeah, our focus remains on the retailers. I think we have a marketing campaign set up for the consumer side, but our focus, the emphasis, is really on retailers and bringing retailers back to the show in substantial numbers. We have been losing retailers to the tune of 8 or 10% every year since COVID, and that's not sustainable.
Right.
So we have to turn that around, um, and we're really focused on again bringing more exhibitors back. If the 2 day consumer show is what is going to attract uh, exhibitors back into the show, the retailers will benefit from that larger audience of exhibitors to do business with at the show. So,
100%.
that's the messaging that we're trying to get out to our retailers. Um, you know, the fact of the matter is the retailer in Oregon is not going to lose any business because of the consumer show in Indianapolis.
Right.
So, we have to really take a step back and try to dissect what is the issue with our retailers and address those issues. And it can be a little bit different from, again, the retailer in Oregon versus the one that's 2 hours away from Indy.
Sure.
But like you said, the pendulum swings both ways. So, the retailer that is 2 hours away from Indy could benefit a lot more from the manufacturers generating this consumer demand for their products and driving them into their local stores to actually make the purchase.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and so when it comes down to, trying to do all of these things at once, which obviously you're trying to do, um, with the different buying cycles, with the dealers still having, and yes, folks, folks, this is just my opinion. It's not the opinion of Bruce Cole or Jeff Poole. This is Greg Poole's opinion. Um, I'm not, and yes, I know that the ATA is a members organization, and I'm going to say this, and some people are probably going to get pissy about it, but those members, aka dealers, are not the customers. And so that's why I think we've seen such a huge explosion in these consumer shows, even pre-COVID. Harrisburg and Iowa Deer Classic, all those Midwest ones, Vegas is huge. Those existed before because they got the consumers under the roof where manufacturers could then make their pitch. And manufacturers don't care where you buy it, just buy it. And so with that being said, and this might be a tough one, Jeff, but what are you doing to this is going to piss some people off, drain the entrenched ATA swamp, per se, to use a DC reference, where the same people who've had the influence and the same people who have kept the ATA a little bit on the backside of the curve are no longer going to, or at least their influence will be minimized to where you can bring it into the new age? Because that's a problem that I kind of still see.
Um, yeah, uh, you kind of beat around the bush on that a little bit, Greg. Uh, I, uh, I'll tell you, I have had tremendous support um, from the board and from even some of the more influentials around the industry. Um, and I think even they have to uh, those industry influencers really have to concede that we cannot keep doing things the same way. The track that we are on, again, is not sustainable. And I think that's gone on a little bit too long. It makes the struggle back tougher.
Right.
But I think we're starting that journey right now, and it doesn't come without some pushback, without some naysayers, without some people who are very resistant to change.
Right.
But we have to push back. And if we're gonna make any substantive change and redirect the path of the trade show by creating this larger event that the trade show is a portion of. And so I think we're getting some movement from those folks now, and whether they are fully on board or not remains to be seen. But I don't count them as obstacles.
Sure. No, that's
You know,
that's
Greg, I want to just add one thing there.
sure.
You know, Jeff invited me, or the board did, to come to their meeting to talk about this. And it's been a long time since I've been to an ATA board member. In fact, I'm sure I was the oldest person in the room. And there was a lot of new faces, but I'll tell you one thing, just overhearing their discussion, um, was really, I think, one of the best things I've heard from the ATA. I mean, there were opinions that ran the gamut, on what to do and how to do it. And I think that they talked very well representing retailers. I don't know how many retail members are on that board, two or three, I think, and then manufacturers. I mean, there was the whole mix of them. And I think that Jeff has done a good leadership, 2 years, 3 years of trying to listen to them and then move forward. But and the last thing I want to add that came to me because of where I live, here's an interesting analogy of everything we're talking about. I'm sure everybody going to listen to this podcast is going to know what Sturgis is when I mention it or when they hear it. Um, you know what Sturgis is other than 700,000 to 1 million people in a town of 5,000? Nobody knows there's races, there's hill climbs. They don't know anything about that.
Right.
They know Sturgis as a bunch of Harley guys, and vendors like you've never seen before. But guess what? Harley's there, Honda's there, Indian's there, all the big bikes are there, and because they got 1 million people there.
Right.
Now I'm kind of contradicting a little bit what I'm representing, but in a perfect world, the best thing that could happen for this whole doing this together thing would be for the tournament to be upstaged by the ATA show, because that's really what it should be.
Right.
The tournament should be the small thing, and I think it will be. I think the ATA show is going to see growth through everything. It's not just the tournament shooters. And by the way, the one word that we haven't used a lot of is customers. I mean, our customers, whether they be in the ATA case, manufacturers and retailers, and ultimately consumers. In our case, they're everybody that shoots in an event. They're all the same people. But if they have a reason to go to something and it builds this thing of, oh yeah, there's the tournament here, but then there's all this over here, that really made me think about that, because I've never talked to a single person that knew there were any races at Sturgis.
Right. Oh, there's lots of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, but they just think it's, all the manufacturers and all the vendors. So, right. I mean, I think that's a great analogy. And I think what they're doing, Jeff's had some good leadership there and their boards behind him. And everything that I've seen looks really positive.
Yeah. And I mean, to your point, Bruce, I think that the only advantage, and this is going to lead me into my next line of questioning for you, Jeff, is media and stuff like that. But I think that the only advantage that the Rushmore Rumble is going to have over the ATA in the interim is that, and this is, look at Total Archery Challenge.
Yeah.
They don't do any marketing. They designed that event so that the people who come there do the marketing for them. It's kind of worked. And so the only advantage that I see, in this case, Rushmore Rumble or the NFAA having, is that you guys have been promoting, you've had people that promote you, and the media side of the sporting event is well established versus previously, Jeff, with all the influencers and TV shows and media people coming to ATA, you couldn't log into the internet without seeing ATA something. And so that's going to be really the only advantage. And so as I transition that to you, Jeff, and I'm not saying to hand out passes like Tic Tacs to everybody who has an Instagram account or anyone that has a television show. However, the more influencers, and I hate to use the word influencers, but that's the parlance of our times. The more television shows, the more people that are coming to the ATA for their benefit, for their social media crowds, and using the ATA's facility and the products there and what's happening at the ATA is that as that, actual content, the more the ATA gets out there. And so my question to you, Jeff, is from a marketing standpoint, what is the ATA doing outside of its own efforts? Because that's kind of the big thing here. And Bruce has experienced this firsthand. The NFAA and the ATA have good platforms, but they're not media platforms. They're organizational platforms, and it's just not the same. And so what are you guys doing to kind of address, separate and combined with the Rushmore Rumble, but what's the ATA doing to kind of address that marketing and exposure standpoint outside of its own efforts?
Yeah, there's really two major things, Greg. You mentioned something earlier about there was a time at the show not that long ago where there were, you know, lines down the aisle of autograph seekers and celebrities of all kinds up and down the aisle, and it in the eyes of some, it made it difficult to conduct business
Right,
to the point that the decision was made to make the first day of the show buyers only. It was buyer only day. So all of the celebrities, all of the media, um, most of the press were not even allowed on the show floor the first day. And it did make it more conducive to doing business that first day. But what it also did is drain every ounce of energy out of the show. And if you don't have it on the first day, you're not getting it on the second day when you invite them back.
right,
So, you used the analogy of the pendulum swinging a little bit too far, which I think it did in this instance. And a couple of years ago, we ceased the buyer only day and welcome media and everyone else that's eligible for the show onto the show floor the first day. We have had some challenges getting those folks back onto the show floor after telling them for years that you're not welcome.
right,
So, so that's the first thing. The red carpet is out. We're hosting some events for just for media um, at the both at the trade show and the super show. And the second thing is relying in the comparison to the TAC events and the way they market or don't market their events, and really trying in combining this event with NFAA and the greatest showman in the industry, and creating a consumer element in addition to the trade show, trying to create a much larger event than just a single show.
right,
And really, when you boil it all down, we've got more than just the ATA show, the Archery and Bowhunting Super Show, and the Rushmore Rumble going on. The day before the ATA trade show opens, there's two buy group shows back to back. Arrow is in the morning, NABA is in the afternoon in the same room with largely the same companies.
right.
And so that's if you add those two shows to the two that we have, that's four shows in 5 days plus an archery tournament.
Right.
So all of that combined, it is a media event, and we're hoping to capitalize on that as one large media event.
Absolutely. And so one of the things that I want to talk about is with the change in how customers are shopping and how customers are buying these days. And I'm not necessarily just talking about the internet, of course, but it has to be mentioned. But so many of these, and this is a question for you, Jeff, on how you're navigating. So 10, 15 years ago and going back, shops all pretty much operated about the same. Everything was on this path. Well, nowadays, I mean, let's be honest, you have Amish shops that don't have email. You have some shops that are so advanced, and you have shops that are ran so well, whether it's, Jimmy Despard in New York or Wayne Endicott in Oregon or Rob Morgan in Montana or Josh up in Washington and now Tennessee and the guys down at Archery Country in Texas. Like you have some shops that are so far ahead of the curve, they're easily qualified as advanced. But you also have a large part of that dealer constituency that still doesn't really answer emails and they still use written checks and all that kind of stuff. So normally, if you were in a different position, it wouldn't be your problem. But because you're the ATA and you're trying to do things on behalf of all of those people while all of those people aren't doing the same thing the same way. How are you navigating that part during this kind of, and I don't want to call it a restructure, but as you know, reinvigorate the ATA, what are you doing to address the different business plans and business models that dealers have these days?
Earlier you asked me about my experiences and exposure in the archery industry and some of the unique facets there. This is absolutely one of the unique facets of the archery industry to have retailers maybe successful in their own right, but don't have email, don't have a web address, and don't want anything to do with it. Don't want it.
Right.
And then you have others on the other end of the spectrum and everybody in between. Um, that is certainly a challenge to try to create sales channels and marketing methods that can be used across the whole spectrum. Because frankly, the ones that don't have the technological savvy, um, they're gonna operate in a much smaller universe than the ones that do.
Right.
Um, our focus, though, has been more on trying to work with retailers and present programs to allow them to recognize opportunities, untapped opportunities, whether they are technologically advanced or not. You mentioned it, the pressure from online sales, direct to consumer sales, that's not going away. That is just growing. It's putting more pressure on margins, and it's really shined a light on the importance of selling service rather than relying on just selling product. And so some of the programs that we have put in place and that we are working on right now involve educating retailers in how to do just that, how to profit from service, whether that be their Bowtech services, whether it be their range. I mean, the concept of profiting from your range, the all of the shops that I'm in, it's more 90% of them, it's just an accepted conclusion that I can't make any money off the range. I don't make any money off the range. That's really I store targets there half the year. So that is you can make money off of your range by and large,
Yeah.
and we are redoing, we're revising our range guide, which is a document, a resource we've had for quite a while. But the revisions we're making to it is how to profit from you in this particular instance, how to profit from your range. Our bow technician certification courses, they lend themselves directly into how to charge a livable rate for your services.
Right.
Still, so many shops are not charging at all for most of their services or charging a ridiculous amount. So showing them how to charge, what's the value of your time, and ultimately how to sell service because you are increasingly challenged to be profitable by selling product only.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's 100% what it is. And so there is no one simple answer for any of that, especially when it comes to dealing with all of those. Let me ask you this. Obviously, for the longest time, we had an ATA president that was, he probably cared more about the legislative side and being in DC than he did some other things. And then we had another one that was kind of the opposite. But legislatively, I think that the ATA has a massive role to play in not only procuring our hunting rights, but securing them and making sure that we doing everything we can not to lose them. And so we don't hear a lot about that the last several years because I think a lot of people have just gotten so busy with social media and the internet and we're bombarded with so much information. We can all remember getting updates in magazines And so if there was a legislative bill that was coming up due, you would see it in the magazine and you're like, oh shit, yeah. So we just don't talk about that a lot these days. And so what is the ATA doing legislatively, whether in DC or otherwise, to continue to fight for bow hunters' rights?
Good question. You know, a lot of our effort is in conjunction with other NGOs, non-government organizations, conservation groups, so on. Sort of approaching these issues as a group of 50 or 60 organizations and exercising influence that way. As a trade group of a relatively small industry, we alone don't wield a very big stick. But there are so we are partnering with on most of our legislative effort. There is one legislative effort that we have taken the lead on because it is specific to archery and fishing. So we've in fact one of our members brought this to our attention a couple of years ago. Um, Steve Greenwood over at Victory Archery about this issue of foreign companies selling directly to U.S. customers through an Amazon or eBay or other internet facilitator and taking advantage of a loophole of not paying their federal excise tax. Well, that's an 11% pricing advantage they have right there on archery and fishing products, or 63 cents a shaft on arrows. Um, and it leaves U.S. manufacturers and U.S. importers at a disadvantage, at a pricing disadvantage. This is an unintended loophole that needs a legislative fix.
Right.
So those things don't happen easy as commonsensical, as easy as it might seem, especially since we're talking about legislation that is not costing anything. It's legislation to fix a loophole that's going to generate more income, more tax revenue. Um, we have made significant progress. We have a House bill, we have a companion bill in the Senate. It's called the Sporting Goods Excise Tax Modernization Act. We expect it to be passed later this year. It's not standalone legislation, but it will be attached to another bill at an opportune time. Um, but that is all two purposes there. One is to level the playing field for our domestic manufacturers who are now at a pricing disadvantage. And the other is to remedy this shortfall, this lapse of federal excise tax dollars getting paid into the Pittman-Robertson Act funding
Right.
to then be returned to state agencies and conservation causes. So um, that is one that we're running point on with American Sport Fishing Association. It hasn't been a quick journey. This has been about a 3-year project, multiple trips to Capitol Hill. Um, and that's for a bill that's relatively easy
Right.
to get passed. So
Yeah.
the legislative side it's a tough one. It's a slow process a lot of times. And you know, on the archery side, there's not a lot of opportunity on the legislative side. Yeah, we can talk about hunting, access, things like that, which again kind of goes back to signing on with the other 50 or 60 organizations to in support of a bill or in opposition to a bill.
Right. Well, and I mean, the FET question is a huge one, and there's a lot of I mean, we could talk about the crossbow influence and how that's affecting FET, but that would be a whole podcast. That'd be a whole nother
Right.
podcast we can do. But in regard to FET, let me ask you this. I know way back in the day, before my time, Bruce probably remembers, but hashtag old man joke. Um, at the ATA, there used to be a table out in the hallway with an FET representative to make sure people that were entering as manufacturers in the ATA show were registered and paying their FET. What is the ATA doing at this point? And I know the ATA has done good to not allow some other country manufacturers into the ATA show that didn't pay FET. But what is the ATA doing right now to make sure that every booth, so that when a customer or another manufacturer walks through the threshold of the convention center in Indy, that every single person at every single table in that building is doing their part for FET.
I'm not sure what was done in the past, Greg. That now these days we have we invite a representative from the IRS that works specifically in their FET section that we have a regular communication with. She does come to the show. She works with our government relations folks, and they walk the floor and they visit booth spaces. From what you were saying, there was previously a table set up before. Now it's really just walking the show floor and kind of going booth to booth and having those conversations and answering questions. There's a it's a complex FET is an overly complex issue. What's subject to FET, what is not, and so there's a lot of times companies just have questions about it. I think they're careful about asking a question in a way that might not be advantageous for them, but
Right.
but at least the opportunity is there.
Yeah. Well, good. I mean,
And I think what Greg's talking about, I'm sure it is, and it goes back a long way. I know as a dealer in the early 80s, we had to pay FET on making arrows. They determined that was manufacturing. And I don't remember who got it changed, but that got changed, and that was a big deal for about 10 years. But that's obviously, this was back when everybody was dipping arrows and fletching them and cresting them, and they were saying that we were all manufacturers as dealers. Well, that was a can of worms that they didn't ever want to open, and that it got resolved. I think that's what you're talking about. But what they do now is, I mean, obviously it's all geared at manufacturers. So I think that's pretty well cleared up.
yeah, I was under the impression, Bruce, that it was part of the actual registration process, that when manufacturers would come and get all their paperwork, they would have to go to the table and make sure that they were registered for FET. That's my understanding of it. But we're talking probably early 90s or so. So it's definitely been a hot minute. But hey guys, I appreciate you guys spending some time with me today. Anything else you guys want to chit chat about real quick that I might have missed? Or I know Bruce, you got all kinds of stuff pinging around in that head of yours.
Yeah, but I don't have enough time for it all on your podcast.
All right, Jeff, you got anything else you want to interject?
No, Greg, I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity. There's a lot going on. This is a big topic. Just an opportunity to get some messaging out there about what we're doing and what our intent is and what we hope the outcome is going to be.
Absolutely.
And I want to thank you too, Greg, and invite everybody listening. Come see what it's like this year. I mean, thinking outside the box is my forte, and I think the ATA is making a good move, and hopefully everything's going to be awesome.
Absolutely. All right, Bruce, let everybody know where they can keep up to date with the NFAA on the World Wide Webs.
Well, the easiest one for me is fieldarchery.com.
Without Brittany, he doesn't know all of the.
I only know the old ones, and it's still pointed to that, so we're good.
Exactly. Just go on Facebook and Instagram and type in NFAA and it'll pop up. Jeff, where can everybody stay up to date with all the goings-ons with the ATA?
Archerytrade.org. You can get all the information there.
There you go. There you go. So those folks are obviously on the socials. I mean, nowadays social media is required, but that's Bruce Cull and Jeff Poole from the ATA and the NFAA. Pretty excited about this year's ATA, folks. I mean, the inclusion of the Rushmore Rumble, it's literally one of those round pegs in a round hole where, folks have tried it in the past. The broadhead shoot was super successful back in the day. I think this one is going to be as well. The fact that they have room for growth is going to be great. Bruce mentioned it already a little bit, whether it's Sturgis, Statue of Liberty, Mount Rushmore. If you're concerned about changing the name because it's not in Yankton anymore, Don't be. If you can have an event in California and call it the Lady Liberty Invitational, and everybody will know what you're talking about. So the name stays, the location can change. The overall vibe of it's going to be great. I definitely think just from the questions, and folks, I'll just be 100% honest with you. I've said hi to Jeff in the past at the trade show, but this was my first opportunity to ever actually interact with him and ask him questions, real questions about real things. And whether you didn't like his answers or not is not my problem, but I am extremely impressed with the fact that he took ownership of some things that folks in his position have not taken ownership of in the past, and it's not even his fault. He is working to reinvigorate the ATA to a position where it's going to be functional and sustainable, and that's huge. But just the fact that it definitely seems like it's genuine and natural from him. Bruce, of course, is doing the same thing with Vegas. So the fact that we now have a president, CEO of the ATA that's not running and hiding from real questions, who is addressing things in a manner that is going to offer us some sort of accountability to where we, as the general population, manufacturers, dealers, whatever, feel comfortable with asking those questions. Because it's just my opinion, folks, that yes, the ATA is a members association, dealers and manufacturers. But without the consumers, what would we be doing with any of that? What would manufacturers and dealers be doing without consumers? And it's 2025, folks, and it's going to be 2026 that quick. And everything's changed. All of it's changed. And so, in my opinion, I think the ATA is an archery organization. And archery includes consumers, dealers, manufacturers. And now a partnership with the NFAA, I think, just my opinion, I think that Jeff couldn't have picked a better organization, and hopefully Bruce has his on mute so he can't hear this, but I don't think he could have picked a better guy to partner with, because Bruce does think outside the box. He's not afraid. He'll try darn near anything. And so I think this partnership is going to be spectacular. So that's going to be it for the podcast today, folks. I definitely think just from this interaction alone that there'll be some stuff I want to talk to Jeff about again in the future. But if you're not coming to if you didn't go to the ATA last year or stopped going for whatever reason, I would really encourage you to go. If you are a influencer like a James Visser from Bow Disciples, or if you're a, whoever you may be, whether you're a Chris B or you're a, Josh will probably be there because he has shops and all that kind of stuff. But if you are a quote unquote influencer, you should come to the ATA, walk around, create good content. And guess what? All you got to do is show up. Have a cameraman, have a microphone, have your walking shoes on, and have your brain about you. And you get to walk around a huge facility and generate all the content you want, and you don't have to do anything else about it. So that part will be good for the industry. It'll be good for your channel as well. So reach out to the ATA, get those passes coming. I didn't ask Jeff about, what they would do to extend invitations and potentially free passes to influencers as a marketing effort, but he's probably still listening to this and he can take that note down as he sees fit. But that's going to be it for the podcast today, folks. Thanks for tuning in and listening. If you're out there driving in any of this weather, I know Memorial Day just got over. The weather's going to start getting nicer. Be safe out there, folks. If you're out on a boat, life vest. If you're out preparing stands or any of that, wear your damn safety rope. We don't want anybody falling or any of that kind of stuff. You guys know the drill. We want to hear from you, not about you. And as always, everybody, love, peace, and chicken grease.